Enjoy the company polo shirt and steakhouse gift card, he said, all smug and entitled like his trust fund gave him the right to humiliate people. That's when I knew it was happening. Austin Pierce, the CEO's 28-year-old experiment in nepotism, was firing me in front of most of our 53-person company. No warning, no documentation, no. Let's talk privately. Just a performance piece during our quarterly all-hands meeting, right between updates on the new logistics software and Q4 projections. I'm Michael Crawford, 48 years old, and I'd been running operations at Apex Logistics for 6 years. Before that, 16 years in Navy logistics and supply chain management. I'd seen my share of incompetent officers, but this kid took the cake. I stood there, hands at my sides, watching him read from a script someone else definitely wrote. Michael has been a valued team member, he said, like he wasn't about to destroy my livelihood with a grin. But due to operational misalignment and our shift toward digital transformation priorities, we've decided to part ways. He reached into one of those corporate gift boxes and pulled out a polo shirt. My name was written on the tag in Sharpie like I was some lost property. Inside was a $40 gift card to a chain steakhouse. Oh, he added like he forgot. And unfortunately, your Q4 bonus didn't meet our updated performance metrics, so it won't be awarded. Updated performance metrics. Kid, I wrote half the operational procedures this place runs on. I felt most of the room turn in slow motion. Sales guys checking their phones, the accounting team pretending to review printouts. Only person who didn't flinch was our CFO, whose expression read, "Don't drag me into this circus." So I smiled. That same calm, professional smile that comes from 22 years of dealing with difficult situations. I took the shirt like it was perfectly normal. "Thanks for the opportunity," I said. My voice was steady, even friendly. Not because I wasn't furious, but because fury is for amateurs, and I'm a professional. Here's what nobody noticed. HR didn't have me sign anything. No exit documentation, no acknowledgement forms, just a cheerful email saying my access would be deactivated by 5 p.m. and good luck with future endeavors. That's because someone in that room knew this wasn't clean. Austin had been gunning for me since he slithered into his VP of Digital Transformation role, which basically meant he attended conferences and talked about blockchain solutions for supply chain optimization. He didn't like that I had influence. He hated that I had institutional knowledge. And he despised that people trusted my judgment over his buzzword presentations. When I questioned his $75,000 AI consulting contract with a firm that turned out to be 3 guys in a WeWork space, HR told me to focus on positive collaboration. When I pointed out that his revolutionary inventory tracking system was causing more delays than our old method, I was told I had a legacy mindset. And now, here we were. I walked straight past the glass offices where executives pretended not to look, past the break room where someone was cutting cake for another successful quarter, past the reception desk where the office manager gave me a sympathetic nod. Outside, Arizona sun was doing its thing, hot, bright, indifferent. I sat in my truck and stared at that polo shirt. Then I tossed it in the back seat and pulled out my personal laptop. The one I never connected to company Wi-Fi. The one with a very specific file stored in a very specific encrypted folder. The file was titled Clause Faustine C Activation.pdf because Austin may have fired me, but I was the one holding the kill switch to their entire operation, and he had no idea what he'd just done. Let me back up to 3 weeks before the polo shirt hit the fan. I sat across from my attorney at a quiet restaurant downtown. Patricia Walsh, 45, sharp as a razor, and twice as cutting when she needed to be. She leaned over my laptop screen and whistled low. "You sure you want to do this, Michael?" I sipped my coffee and nodded. "They've been treating me like an employee, but I've been operating like a contractor. Time I got some insurance." The insurance in question was a licensing clause buried so deep in our vendor consolidation agreement, it might as well have been in witness protection. See, while everyone was focused on Austin's flashy presentations about AI-powered logistics revolution, I'd spent 8 months rebuilding our entire operational backbone. The problem was, that backbone wasn't company property. We'd been cobbling together third-party solutions, patching them like digital duct tape on a leaking pipe. So I built a new system, clean, efficient, scalable, and I did it through my own LLC, Crawford System Solutions, which had been on our vendor list for 3 years, listed under operational consulting and system integration. Nobody questioned when the invoice structure changed slightly. Nobody blinked when I submitted work statements that routed licensing rights to my LLC, not the company. And nobody, especially not Austin, read the fine print about license revocation upon improper termination of key personnel. It passed through legal like a routine vendor agreement. Rubber stamped, filed, forgotten. The clause was beautiful in its simplicity. If the company terminated me without documented cause and formal review process, the perpetual license would automatically revoke. No lawsuit, no arbitration, just lights out. Now, was it calculated? Absolutely. Was it legal? Hell yes. Was it visible to anyone not reading with a magnifying glass? Not a chance. Austin never suspected anything. He was too busy optimizing synergies and disrupting traditional paradigms. The day I finalized that contract, he was posting LinkedIn articles about why experience is overrated in the new economy. Meanwhile, I was buying digital insurance that could crater his entire fake empire. I tested the clause in a sandbox. Environment first. Ran it through external counsel. Not a single red flag. Everything checked out clean. Even our compliance team logged it into the vendor management system like it was just another service agreement. That's the thing about being quiet and methodical. People assume you're harmless. They forget that quiet people build the foundations they're standing on. After that contract was signed, I printed one copy, stored it in a fireproof safe at home next to my discharge papers and truck title. Digital version was AES-256 encrypted and backed up to 2 separate secure drives. I didn't want to use it. Let me be clear about that. I like my job, didn't love the politics or the nepotism, but I respected the work, the systems, the people who depended on things running smoothly. But every time Austin smiled with those veneers and called me Big Mike in meetings like I was his friendly neighborhood mechanic, I felt that trigger finger twitch. And when I caught him redirecting operational budget to his pet AI projects without approval, I knew the countdown had started. The thing about clauses like 14C, they're silent bombs. Nobody hears the ticking until it's too late. And the beautiful part? That clause wasn't hidden behind legal jargon. It was right there in plain English. One paragraph titled, License Reversion Upon Improper Termination. Might as well have been labeled, Push This Button. If you're stupid enough to fire me without cause. So, when HR handed me that $40 steakhouse card and a company polo shirt, telling me we're pivoting to new operational paradigms, I didn't argue. I didn't protest. I just smiled and thought, activate clause. Austin floated into Apex like he'd been airlifted from a tech conference, designer laptop bag, startup buzzwords, and the confidence of someone who'd never had a performance review in his life. No logistics experience, no operational background, just a press release announcing him as VP of Digital Transformation, a role with all the authority and none of the accountability. He took over the second floor with standing desks and motivational posters about failing fast and moving fast and breaking things. Then he took aim at everything I'd built. It started subtle. My monthly operational reports would mysteriously disappear from meeting agendas. Budget approvals got rerouted through his innovation committee that somehow included his college roommate as a digital strategy consultant. If I raised operational concerns in meetings, he'd say things like, let's think outside the traditional framework, or Michael's perspective represents legacy thinking. Legacy thinking. I was trying to keep packages moving efficiently, while he was billing $50,000 for a consultant to tell us we needed more dashboards. The vendetta was obvious to anyone paying attention. My competence made him look incompetent. Every time I calmly pointed out flaws in his latest initiative, like the 25,000 blockchain pilot program that couldn't track a single package, he'd get that tight smile and say something like, Michael brings important institutional perspective to discussions. Institutional perspective. Like I was a museum exhibit that still functioned. So I started documenting everything, every bypassed approval, every mysterious consulting fee, every budget reallocation that somehow benefited his innovation projects. I built folders, color-coded, time-stamped, backed up to secure drives under project names that looked innocuous. I even recorded one video call where he suggested we could eliminate most warehouse staff by implementing autonomous fulfillment solutions. Translation: robots that didn't exist yet. I didn't escalate, not yet. When HR suggested mediation to align communication styles, I just smiled and said I was perfectly aligned with professional standards and operational efficiency. Austin didn't want alignment, he wanted elimination, and I could see it happening in real time. The way he'd slowly rewrite my contributions with his marketing speak. In company newsletters, he'd talk about revolutionizing our logistics infrastructure, like he was the one who'd negotiated our carrier contracts and streamlined our warehouse operations. One afternoon, he walked past my desk with his phone out and said loudly, "Yeah, Michael's great at keeping the trains running, but we need engineers who can build new tracks." I stared at my monitor, smiling because the tracks he wanted to build were heading straight off a cliff, and I held the deed to the whole railroad. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday when I found the smoking gun. I'd been combing through the Q4 budget allocations because something felt wrong, like numbers that didn't add up when you knew what they should be. We were under budget on operations, yet somehow short on performance bonuses. Real short. I clicked into the raw disbursement logs, cross-referenced against payroll, then against project completion reports. That's when I saw it. A series of transfers labeled Digital Innovation Implementation, totaling $15,000. Recipient: Pierce Innovation Consulting, LLC. I blinked, thought maybe this was some legitimate vendor I'd missed. I pulled the vendor registration. Nothing in our system, nothing in accounts payable except a line item with a fabricated vendor code and a timestamp 3 days before our bonus notifications were delayed pending budget review. I dug deeper. Austin had manually rerouted funds from the employee bonus pool to this ghost company, then transferred them to himself. Called it an accelerated innovation investment, an investment where he invested our money in his own pocket. I printed the report, didn't email it, didn't save it to company drives, printed it, held it in my hands under my kitchen light like evidence of a crime, which it was. I slipped it into a folder marked Project Documentation and set it on my bookshelf next to my Navy logistics manuals. Let it marinate, because I knew the sword was coming. This just confirmed the blade was sharp. The next morning, I was called into an informal discussion with HR. The HR office smelled like vanilla air freshener and corporate cowardice. Austin was already there, sipping some designer coffee drink like he'd earned it. The HR manager, Janet, looked like she'd aged 5 years since I'd last seen her. "Michael," she said, reading from a printed statement, "we've identified some challenges with cultural alignment and resistance to organizational evolution. Leadership has decided to pursue a different operational direction." Austin nodded solemnly like we were discussing a terminal diagnosis. "I know this is difficult," he added with manufactured sympathy, "but sometimes change is necessary for growth." I looked at him for a full 10 seconds, long enough to make him shift in his ergonomic chair. Then I stood. "Do I need to sign anything?" Janet looked panicked. "Oh, we'll send exit documentation electronically. Nothing immediate. Perfect." That's how I knew they'd skipped the legal process entirely. No documentation, no performance reviews, just cultural challenges. A vague, cowardly catch-all you use when your real reason wouldn't survive scrutiny. I walked out slower this time, not from sadness, from control, like a professional leaving a job site after completing the work. Back in my truck, I opened my laptop, connected to my phone's hotspot. I uploaded 2 files to secure servers. First, the bonus theft documentation, sent directly to Patricia Walsh with the subject line, "Austin's Retirement Plan." Second, Clause 14C activation notice, uploaded to a time-stamped repository with IP ownership metadata already authenticated. No dramatic speeches needed, no angry emails. Just cold documentation and a very loud clock starting to tick. Disappearing from a company isn't like ghosting someone after a bad date. It's more surgical, more final. You remove your fingerprints and let their mess come into focus. I didn't update LinkedIn with some fake optimistic on to new adventures, post with a coffee shop selfie. No farewell emails, no cryptic social media posts. Just vanished. And nothing unnerves a dysfunctional workplace more than professional silence. The engineers I'd mentored kept working. The warehouse supervisors I'd trained kept their operations running. But the underlying system, the digital backbone that made everything possible, that belonged to me, And Austin was about to find out what happens when you fire the architect, but try to keep using his blueprints. Behind the scenes, Pinnacle Capital started their due diligence for the Series B funding round. $50 million on the table. Suddenly every process, every system, every vendor agreement I'd ever touched was under investor microscopes. Except now, there was no me to explain why vendor 7B had specific handling requirements, or why the inventory rotation had to follow the sequence I'd programmed, or why the exception handling protocols existed in the first place. I watched from a distance, coffee hot, conscience clear. First sign of trouble came within 48 hours. The finance team sent revenue projections off by $800,000. They blamed it on system integration delays, but the truth was simpler. They never learned the verification processes I'd built because Austin had dismissed them as legacy overhead. Then came the operational meltdown. 3 fulfillment centers went offline in 1 week. Austin's AI consulting team couldn't troubleshoot it because the system architecture used my design patterns, not their theoretical frameworks. I'd documented everything thoroughly, but in my LLC's repositories, not the company's. Clause 14C made sure of that. Austin went into damage control mode. In the weekly leadership video, he called it growing pains in our digital transformation journey and said the team was embracing operational agility. Corporate speak for we have no idea what we're doing, but we're going to spin it like innovation. Meanwhile, performance metrics slipped like a truck on black ice. Delivery windows missed, customer complaints spiked. Partners started asking pointed questions about operational stability. Austin blamed change resistance and legacy system dependencies. He said this while wearing a t-shirt that read, "Disrupt everything," which made me laugh out loud in my kitchen. HR tried spinning it as infrastructure modernization challenges, but infrastructure wasn't the problem. I was the infrastructure, and they'd fired me without reading the warranty. Every missed shipment was a crack in their foundation. Every investor question about system reliability was a sledgehammer to their credibility. And every time Austin opened his mouth to explain, he shoved more dynamite into his father's company. Pinnacle Capital's analysts weren't idiots. They asked specific questions. When the answers were vague or inconsistent, or routed through 3 different people with no clear ownership, they started highlighting problems, actually highlighting them. Yellow marker on every missing process document, every incomplete integration, every contract that referenced systems the company no longer had legal access to. I imagine the boardroom felt like a pressure cooker about to blow. Meanwhile, I was rebuilding my garage workbench and learning how to smoke brisket properly. The calm was incredible, not having to fix other people's mistakes while they questioned my methods. Austin never called directly, but I noticed strange activity on my professional profiles. Someone from Apex IP address had viewed my LinkedIn page 14 times in 1 week. My old GitHub repositories got pinged from their network. My LLC website received 8 visits from Phoenix in 3 days. Still, I said nothing. No hints, no warnings, no leaks. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let incompetent people talk long enough to hang themselves. And Austin was practically handing out rope. It was Thursday, exactly 1 week before, Apex's big pitch to Pinnacle Capital, when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Usually I let those go to voicemail, but something about the timing made me curious. "Hello, is this Michael Crawford?" The voice was tight, professional, nervous. "This is Bradley Moss, external counsel for Apex Logistics. I was hoping to discuss some time-sensitive operational matters. Nothing official, just informal guidance." I let the silence stretch until he started breathing funny. Then I said, "I appreciate the call, Bradley, but I'm not available for informal anything." He stumbled. "I understand. It's just that certain systems you previously managed have gaps. We're in final pitch preparation and—" "Gaps," I said. "That's interesting." I didn't ask which gaps. I knew. The automated routing system I'd built through my LLC, undocumented in their files. The integration protocols that prevented data corruption when our main servers went down every other Tuesday. Also undocumented because I'd warned them about knowledge transfer procedures months ago. You can't manage institutional knowledge through hope and good intentions. Bradley thanked me anyway and hung up. That night I poured a glass of bourbon, the good stuff I'd been saving for special occasions, and pulled out a manila envelope from my file cabinet. Inside, One sheet of letterhead, weighted paper stock, my LLC's official seal. Title: Formal Notice of Clause Activation, Article 14C. Body: due to improper termination without documented cause or formal review process, this letter serves as official notification that exclusive licensing rights to all systems, protocols, and integrations have been revoked per Article 14C of the signed agreement between Apex Logistics Solutions and Crawford Systems Solutions, LLC. Access authorization terminated effective upon receipt timestamp of this notice. I slipped it into a certified envelope addressed to every board member, CEO included. Not email, not phone call. Paper, tangible, legal, undeniable. Then I scheduled a courier to hand deliver it to Apex's office first thing in the morning. Not a weapon, a mirror. The boardroom was all glass and hubris, 23 floors up with a view of the mountains. One of those conference tables that cost more than most people's cars. It was Apex's big day, the Series B pitch to Pinnacle Capital, the presentation that was supposed to transform them from regional player to national powerhouse. Austin was dressed for his coronation, designer suit, Apple Watch, water bottle with time markers like some life coach's wet dream. His PowerPoint had animations, actual animations for a logistics company presentation. "Thank you for joining us," he said, clicking his remote like he was hosting a TED Talk about disrupting traditional thinking. At Apex, we don't just move packages, we architect the future of fulfillment. That line made James Morrison, Pinnacle's lead partner, raise an eyebrow. For investors, that's basically a fire alarm. The presentation rolled on, slides with growth projections, pie charts of market penetration, buzzwords stacked like a house of cards. Scalable automation, AI-driven optimization, blockchain-enabled transparency. No mention of operational reality. No mention of system stability. No mention of the digital foundation that was about to disappear like smoke. Austin clicked to a slide titled The Next Chapter. We've positioned ourselves to triple revenue in 18 months through strategic partnerships and proprietary system leverage. That's when James slowly opened his due diligence folder. I was there, sitting in the back corner. James had insisted I attend for technical continuity review. The Apex board, too flustered to think strategically, had agreed. Austin didn't know I was coming until he walked into the room and saw me sitting there like Banquo's ghost. But he powered through, pretending my presence didn't matter, like I was just another piece of furniture. James flipped through documents page by page, took his time, didn't speak. Austin launched into a segment about team synergy and retention rates, conveniently highlighting metrics from before his arrival. He was smiling too wide now, rehearsed charm starting to crack around the edges. That's when his phone, face down beside his motivational water bottle, lit up like a pinball machine. 15 missed calls from legal, 3 voicemails, red notification badges from the executive group chat. He blinked, paused mid-sentence, swallowed hard. His voice wobbled slightly as he continued. "And we believe our innovation culture is our competitive moat." James held up a hand. "Before we continue, can we clarify something?" Austin froze mid-slide. "Of course." James pulled out a document. My termination notice. He read it silently while the room held its breath. This memo states that Michael Crawford was terminated for operational misalignment and resistance to digital transformation. Austin nodded quickly. "Correct." We had philosophical differences about strategic direction. James didn't react. Was this termination reviewed by legal counsel? Austin's mouth opened, closed. His father, CEO Charles Pierce, shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. James turned to the next page. "This is correspondence from Crawford Systems Solutions dated yesterday. Article 14C notification." Austin's knuckles went white on the table edge. James continued reading. "This clause revokes all back-end system licensing effective immediately upon improper termination of key personnel. It cites lack of formal cause, documentation, or review process. Silence. The kind of silence that precedes explosions." James didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. He sat there like a surgeon delivering a diagnosis. This termination, was it approved by legal? Austin finally found his voice. HR handled the process. It was a cultural fit issue. James didn't look at him. He flipped to the next document and held it up with 2 fingers. Signed licensing agreement with Article 14C clearly marked. Exclusive system access contingent upon continued employment without cause-based termination of designated key personnel. Revocation immediate upon breach. He placed the document on the table like evidence in a murder trial. This clause was filed, registered, and time-stamped prior to your current operational infrastructure. Meaning, when you terminated Mr. Crawford without cause or legal review, you didn't just fire your head of operations. Pause. Let it sink in. You terminated the license to your core systems. You no longer own your logistics platform. The general counsel stood up so fast, his chair rolled back and hit the window. How did this get signed? I drafted it myself, I said calmly from the back row. Your department approved it during vendor consolidation. Routine service agreement. James looked around the table. Without this license, you have no legal right to operate the systems you're demonstrating. What you're showing us today is technically stolen property. Austin tried one last desperate play. This can't be legal. You terminated your head of operations without cause, without documentation, and without legal review, James said, standing. Then you tried to pitch investors on systems he built and owned. That's not business strategy. That's fraud. He walked out, leaving $50 million in smoke in a room full of people staring at the wreckage. I stood quietly, straightened my jacket, and walked toward the door. As I passed the catering table, I noticed Austin had left his motivational water bottle behind. Outside, my phone buzzed with new emails. Acquisition discussion, your terms, partnership opportunity, and Crawford System Solutions, investment interest. 22 years of experience reduced to cultural misalignment. 6 years of building systems, dismissed as legacy thinking. One carefully crafted legal clause, activated by pure stupidity. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's just being prepared when incompetence finally meets consequence, and letting the silence do the talking. Because when someone tries to erase your professional legacy with a polo shirt and a steakhouse gift card, there's really only one response. Build something they can't live without, make sure you own it, and let them find out the hard way what happens when they confuse loyalty with desperation. The quiet ones don't just keep the trains running. Sometimes we own the tracks. 6 months later, Austin Pierce was working at a coffee shop in Scottsdale, telling customers about his revolutionary ideas for optimizing latte workflow. His father sold Apex to my new company for pennies on the dollar. I kept most of the original staff. They had earned their jobs through competence, not connections. The industry noticed. Experience had finally trumped entitlement, and word travels fast in logistics circles. Sometimes justice isn't immediate, but when it comes, it's complete.